Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live. And I'm Cyril Stover. Of course, this is the very first in the year 2023. So I suppose it's still in order to say a very happy new year to you out there. Well, in 2022, the federal government presented an estimated budget before a joint session of the National Assembly. The proposed total expenditure for the year was put at 16.39 trillion naira, with a crude oil benchmark price of $57 per barrel and a daily oil production estimate of 1.88 million barrels. The exchange rate was projected at just a little above 410 naira to the dollar, and the projected GDP growth rate of 4.2% with a 13% inflation rate. Now, 12 calendar months have wound down. And now it's time to look back at the performance of sectors across the economy against prospects for 2023. Now that's what will engage our attention tonight. But before we go into the discussion, let's get to see this report put together by correspondent Musa Abubakar.
2022 may be gone, but not forgotten in a hurry. It's a year that Nigeria's gross domestic product grew by 3.11% in real terms in the first quarter of 2022, showing a sustained positive growth for the sixth consecutive quarter since the recession witnessed in 2022. Growth in quarter 2 2022 remained a positive at 3.54%, while quarter 3 grew by 2.25% in real terms. The non-oil sector continued to outperform the oil sector, with the major contributions from agriculture, transportation, trade, information and communications, amongst other sectors.
2022, in the second quarter, ICT alone contributed 18.44% to our GDP. The quarterly contribution has catapulted from 51 billion to 408 billion. The Nigeria Startup Act is a major legacy of this administration. Many countries are reaching out to Nigeria for guidance on how to enact their own Startup Act.
Thanks to various policies and programs by the federal government to drive growth in those sectors. This is with investment in infrastructure development aimed at providing conducive environment for businesses to thrive.
We were able to optimize fiscal incentives to boost productivity in critical selected sectors, specifically agriculture, solid minerals, and manufacturing. And also we're able to put in place a process for monthly reconciliation of revenues from the 1,700 ministries, departments, and agencies. This process was not in place before, so now we're able to track the revenues and reconcile the remittances to the bank, and we have been able to really almost eliminate the incidences of non-remittances to the Federation.
Rate of inflation at over 21% remain a major challenge despite CBN interventions to stabilize the economy. Uncertainties like the war in Ukraine further worsen COVID-19 recovery, leading to a high cost of energy and food in the year under review.
Inflation growing every day. You have food inflation almost at the same levels. Okay, you have urban and rural inflation, but the worst is the food inflation. Okay, and for the very simple reason that we are not substituting our imports, from either Russia or Ukraine. we are depending on them for probably what is at the heart of our food chain, which is wheat.
With 2023 in perspective, improved revenue from removal of fuel subsidy and improved oil production is expected as policymakers are said to be cautiously optimistic, with IMF projection that global economy may likely be in recession. In Abuja, I am Musa Abubakar.
Sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's start off by introducing our guests. I'd like to welcome to this program Ben Akabo. Is the Director General Budget Office of the Federation. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Right. We're also joined tonight by Amos Sakaba, an investment economist. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Good evening, Nigerians.
And joining us from our Kano studio is Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliu, a businessman and, of course, a former minority leader of the House of Representatives. Good to see you.
Nigeria, Happy New Year to all.
All right, thank you very much. And well, as we always say, at some point in this program, you can get to be part of it. When we get to that point, we'll remind you of the procedure. But for now, let's begin this way. And DG Budget Office, much to the relief of many Nigerians, the budget cycle has returned to what everyone thinks it should be, start of the year to the end of the year. Far cry from what used to obtain in the past, where no one could really tell what the cycle was. But today, of course, the President signed the 2023 budget into law. We'll take some time and look at that. But first, tell us how you made it to return the cycle of the budget to January, December. Give us an insight into that.
Well, thank you. First, it's important to say that that is an outcome of strong collaboration between the executive and the legislative arms of government, without which it will not be possible. Our constitution currently simply prescribes that the president has to present a budget for a year before the end of the preceding year, the 31st of. So technically, if the president presented the budget for 2023 on the 31st of December 2022, he will be in compliance with the prescription of the Constitution. And to complicate matters more, unlike countries, we do not have an organic budget law in the country, which prescribes hard timelines for different activities in the budget cycle, and therefore, without collaboration of both arms of government agreeing that this was a desirable goal, it will not have been possible. But again, sometimes people don't fully understand why this is important. One of the key benefits of this is to introduce predictability. Uncertainty is not good for business. Uncertainty is not good for planning. And a lot of the private sector, the government in aggregate is only about 10% of the GDP of this country. Therefore, the private sector is the key of the economy. But then government as a single entity, especially the federal government, is the largest economic player in the country, and government has responsibility for policy. Therefore, the biggest part that the government's budget plays is a strong signaling effect, that the direction of where government policy is headed, where government expenditure is, the direction of play and all of that, from which the private sector can take a cue and from their own plans, as well as the fact that when the budget is based on a number of assumptions, and those assumptions are undergirded by policies and regulations and laws. So when you come out with budget assumptions, the private sector, other economic actors also take a cue from that. So that's why this is really important.
All right, so good enough on a departure from the past, what used to be. But let's take a sneak peek into the critical sectors of this year's budget, if you might.
Well, as usual, first we have a budget where if you cut it up between what we call discretionary expenditure and non-discretionary expenditure, I think that's a good place to start, because sometimes when someone hears we have a budget for 2023 21.83 trillion, sometimes they don't understand why they can't have a lot more money than is currently allocated to certain sectors. But out of this 21.83 trillion naira, for instance, 6 point of that is debt service expenditure. You have about 5.2 that is for personnel costs and pensions. So between those two already, you are at about 12 trillion naira of this. Okay, and these are non-discretionary expenditure. Then you have statutory transfers, certain expenditures that are mandated by law, that you must transfer allocate a certain percentage, for instance, whether it's to TED Fund, whether it's to UBEC, okay, and then of course the other arms of government. That again is close to 1 trillion naira. So at the end of the day, you've got to provide for all of these before you then start allocating what's left to the different sectors. When it now comes to allocating to the different sectors, we have core infrastructure sector, the works and housing ministry, roads, transport infrastructure. Then you have our social sectors, education, health, and social protection. Between all of these sectors, the money is fully accounted for, almost.
Well, so we'll talk more about that as we go on. But at this point, let me bring in the investment economist who's here, Amos Sakaba.
Yeah.
Today we're going to take a look at what or how the budget performed in the various sectors last year. But again, it's important to look at what we expect to happen this year with the budget having been signed into place. Quite a number of people believe that this is just an annual ritual. Every year a budget is drawn up, it is signed into law. But for many ordinary folks, how does this reflect on their standard of living, their quality of life, and the various sectors? When you look at this budget, what do you see?
Yeah, thank you very much. The budget itself, is a bold attempt to look at all the pressing issues that the economy has been going through. We are aware the economy is just coming out of COVID-19, the Ukraine war, the global threats of depression, energy crisis, and we have all local issues to do with insurgency and banditry and its impact on agriculture and key sectors of the economy. So, given the prevailing situation where we have debts to service, Yet we need to build on the investment already put into infrastructure for the purpose of creating the enabling environment to grow the private sector and businesses and the GDP. It becomes even important, and like the DG said, private sector people are waiting for the budget to define direction so that they know where to put their monies and to know what priorities of government are. But also important is relating the budget to the National Development Plan. I think this is very important. Government had launched a very elaborate economic development plan 2021 to 25, widely involving a lot of consultation. I've always said that national development plan, will stand the test of time, in the sense that even if there's any new government coming, they will not fundamentally alter there will be no fundamental changes in that plan, apart from just a few tinkering of the plan to suit specific development priorities. But I think that budget has identified the challenges and the way to go. Personally, I think we should be looking at the fiscal side of the budget, and again, the efforts of government through the enabling business council to really create the improvement in the investment climate of Nigeria, because it is the private sector that will grow the economy. Government, like the DG said, will concentrate on those non-discretionary allocations. But really, we need to consciously take measures and continue to sustain the current reforms in the business climate. Thank you.
But then, when you say, for those who are a little bit uncomfortable with 6 trillion or 6 point something for debts?
Well, if you are indebted, you have to pay the debt, because that's what makes you credit worthy. Our debt is high, there's no doubt about it, but we have capacity to reverse the trend, and the starting point is to begin to service the loan, so that we get the confidence of our creditors, and also ensure that the budget is used to channel these funds in those critical sectors of the economy that requires a push.
Okay. Well, let's go over to Kano and link up with Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliu. And the same way, we'll just put the question to you. And the budget has been signed into law today. What are you expecting, just before we begin to look at what happened in 2022? What do you see?
Well, good evening, Nigeria. You see, my personal assessment and views, I think the government, in terms of budgeting, the executive arm of government is probably helpless, in such a way that no matter what we talk about, inflation and so on, has to do with the budgeting system. And you could see from the president's speech that my colleagues in the National Assembly have jacked up the budget with about 700 and something billion. I mean, politics should be removed from this. Lagos-Ibadan road network, second Niger bridge, Kano-Abuja Kaduna road. These are projects done on behalf of all of us by the government. So it baffles me why members of National Assembly will have to get projects to be dedicated to them. And these kind of things are... So I think, politically speaking, probably the government needs to do better by sitting down with members of National Assembly. Look, we are same government, irrespective of whichever party, whether the ruling party has the majority or not. Now, there has to be convergence of the truth. The difference between truth and reality. Should we be having these rituals, as we call it, which is certainly rituals? You find out that the recurrent expenditure every year grows, and as much as possible, it is funded 100%. But the capital expenditure suffers. So that's why you get all these inflation and so on. So if the government, the executive arm of government and the legislator cannot come together and know that, look, it's our country, it's the same government, whichever party you belong to. So I personally do not subscribe to members of National Assembly inserting projects in the budgeting system of this country. And left to me, in fact, I advise some of my colleagues in government that, look, the executive probably needs to go to Supreme Court and get interpretation. Now, budgeting, whether the National Assembly has the right to tinker with the budget or to do whatever he wants to do with it, and so that let us know if the Supreme Court says that, look, budgeting should be done by National Assembly, the executive should have no input, so be it. But not when the executive know exactly where it pinches, know exactly how these revenues come, know exactly what and where should be funded, place the budget before National Assembly. And in the wisdom of National Assembly, because of the powers given to it by the Constitution, that's why I say, the Constitution probably speaks from both sides of its cheek. But we need to get to the bottom of this. We cannot continue to every year in, year out, be talking about inflation, GDP, and so on. Look, the masses of this country don't care about all these figures, all these numbers you call about. The problem is, look, how much is the bag of rice today? How much do you buy gari? So these are the things that people will ask. Now, if members of National Assembly don't see these things, see it from the point of, look, I have to insert a project. Members of my constituency must know that I have brought a project. I think we have to educate our country, the people, that, look, it's one government, one people, one National Assembly, irrespective of party. So we have to start from that. And as long as we do not get to the bottom of this, the ritual will continue, year in, year out. Inflation will keep going on. The government will try its best, but its best will not be good enough. I take for now.
So let's come back to Abuja here, and perhaps at this point in time, we might begin to look at the economy, and review aspects of what happened to the economy in 2022. Now, it's a mixed bag. Some say, well, Nigeria has fared well, but others say no. When you look at it from the level of individual hardships and so, it's not been smooth sailing at all. Not that anyone expects that it would be calm waters all the time, but what would you assess the state of the Nigerian economy in 2022, and how did the 2022 budget impact on this?
Well, without a doubt, 2022 was quite challenging on the economic front for Nigeria, as it was for most countries around the world. There are a number of economic challenges that basically you find it hard to identify that country that was exempted from the impact of that. First, we've still got the lingering effects of COVID-19. China, which is a major base for logistics and manufactured goods. Sometimes China is described as the world's factory. China is still grappling with lockdowns and still creating disruptions to global supply chains, and this is part of what's driving inflation. Because we've still had so that's it. COVID-19 still somehow impacting all of us. And then Russia-Ukraine war was thrown into the mix, and that itself has disrupted global supply chains around food, because both Russia and Ukraine are major sources of grains, staple food for the world, and also major suppliers of fuel. So these have basically driven energy costs very high, and almost across every country in the world they've seen inflations at levels that they haven't. For us in Nigeria, inflation is at a 17-year high, In countries like the US, they are seeing inflation at a 40-year high. So these have been, so, but when you then come back home, we've got also on top of these, global challenges, our own peculiar challenges. We still have the challenge of security, which is taking a toll on agricultural output, with farmers not being able to, and therefore also fueling the food as inflation. And then we've got the challenge with our oil production, where oil production is currently at about 50% of where we planned to be in terms of the volume. So if you imagine if during 2022, with oil prices as high as they were, if we didn't have all of these disruptions in oil production, some due to theft, some due to other challenges in the sector, including the lack of significant investment over years, and aging wells, and pipeline integrity, and then the vandalism, and all of those. If we had 1 million barrels of crude additional production throughout 2022, that would have made a significant difference, one, to government revenues across the different tiers of government, and therefore the capacity of the different tiers of government to respond to the demand for public goods and services. But also because oil export remains our principal source of foreign exchange. 1 million barrels incremental per day throughout the year will have made a very significant difference to our supply of foreign exchange in the country, and therefore the exchange rate of the naira vis-a-vis the dollar, which itself is a key driver of inflation, given the significant import dependent structure of our economy. So these are some of the factors that drove the hardship, the difficulties that people faced in 2022.
Well, still along those lines, would you say there were concerted and deliberate successes in addressing these challenges? And because for whatever we're looking at, prospected in 2023, it's against the backdrop of what happened in 2022. And as you mentioned too, a carryover of the challenges and certain attempts to address those issues.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the point needs to be made that the current economic crisis the country is going through is not in isolation, and but more importantly, we should be interrogating the attempts, the mechanisms put in place in managing this crisis on the part of those that are responsible for doing that. If you look at the management of the fiscal and monetary policies, there's still a little bit of mismatch, or let me say there's no effective coordination. Over the years, we've seen a lot of interventions on the part of CBN in various sectors, which at face value, they are okay. But to what extent is the Ministry of Finance involved in these programs? And to what extent are the ministry, the sector ministry, the process ministries involved on this intervention program? That's why we are now having crisis of how to recover some of the funds, and also how to measure the impact of the policies on the economy. But very importantly, I think there's need to have that congruence between monetary and fiscal policy, because fiscal policy allows you to adjust during the budget cycle. It allows you to correct, streamline, and reprioritize in the course of implementing the budget without hurting the sensibilities of the legal requirements as the honorable member was talking about, when the reason this budget is unique is because it is rooted in the politicization, because this is an election year, and everybody wants to present a scorecard to his constituents, and for you to be able to do that, you must be able to show your people that you caused a project to happen in your constituency, and you deserve another chance, or you deserve another go at it. So it's not surprising, and it's not the first time it's been done. It's been like that, but it's important also. I agree with him that before the budget presentation, there should be some engagements, some critical strategic stakeholder engagements, which I believe the process must have been taking place within the government cycle, but I don't know the extent to which the legislative and the judiciary are involved in this kind of consultation and engagements. But it shows also that there hasn't been a consensus in terms of how what the priorities of government is and what best strategies to adopt in attacking this monster of inflation or inflationary pressures, shortage of foreign exchange, low productivity in the oil and gas sector, and a number of, not to tackle internal problems of insecurity. All these, have something to do with the quality of how budget is implemented. But I think we need to insulate the budget from the politics of budget.
Right. You see, I like the term, the politics of budget and budgeting. Honorable Farouk, the politics of budget and budgeting. No doubt, global events impacted the Nigerian economy. Well, some would say to you that even before some of those global events, for instance, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Nigerian economy was in dire straits anyway. And so this just came in. And so how much of this, how well did we perform in managing those challenges and looking at the fact that they will certainly have something on what happens this year?
First of all, just like what the DG said, last year was certainly a challenging year. And I hope the government, the incoming government certainly, will look at how to mitigate some of these problems. Yes, this country is not an island, and some of these issues from other countries also rub on our country. But I still come back to the DG. You find out that how much have they reduced in their current expenditure? They haven't done that. They've not reduced anything. So the government also needs to look at that. And just like what Sakaba said about also the fiscal, and monetary issues, you find out the Central Bank of Nigeria, it's probably a government on itself. They have virtually intervened in every sector. They don't have the experience. They don't have the expertise. So you find out that in most areas they have intervened. It's like lost money. They have given so much money to sectors, but I don't know how that money is going to come out. Why? Because central bank is not an institution to give monies directly to people the way they were doing it. So these are things that the government needs to look at to make sure that Central Bank of Nigeria stays within its limit, and so that also monetary, the fiscal and monetary dispensations are segregated. They cannot be interwoven without having a confluence of ideas to meet and know. Because now if you ask the DG, probably he would not tell you what happens in central bank last week. What are they doing? What have they done to impact in his budgeting? Or was central bank part of his budgeting system? They are not. So many things that the government is trying to do, central bank is doing something different. So these are kind of things that certainly the government, as I said, the elites, the political class, need to look at it. Remove politics from it. Look at the country. What do we do to ensure that this budgeting is not just a ritual. So that at least every year, minimum of 70 to 80% capital expenditure is carried out. So until such a time when we do that, but how do we do that? That to have, the agreement amongst all of us that look, is what we are doing correct? No, we are not doing the right thing. As I said, the recurrent expenditure is too high. If you go to government houses, you find that none of the government houses is reducing its own expenditure. And also, the country looks at like federal government, everything federal government, forgetting the fact that like hospitals, general hospitals are not under federal government, forgetting the fact that like primary school, secondary schools are not under federal government. So these kind of things that people look at federal government, like if you've quarreled with your wife, is the federal government. If nothing happens in your business, it's federal government. So we have to agree as a people that look, now we hold the government accountable. That look, government, we shall not allow you to look at CBN and allow them to do whatever they want. You, the DG budget, we should also not allow you, like the National Assembly should try to keep knocking on you to ensure that, look, you, when you are arranging these budgets, when you are making these budgets, you have interface with them. Not when you finish the budget, you just dump on them, and probably that's why they finish it in such a hurry, and because we have to do it January to December, and then we get it signed, and then later we try to come with supplementary budgets and so on and so forth. So we as a people of this country need to agree that, are we going to do these things rightly? Yes. How do we do it rightly to make sure whoever goes outside the rim is called back to do what he's supposed to be doing?
All right, thank you so much. At this point, we have a number of reports which we'll take. Let's start with this one that's coming from Lagos.
Despite going through some rough patches in the year 2022, Nigeria's economy maintained a steady course in the journey towards achieving a sustainable and viable market space for both foreign and domestic business to thrive.
In a bid to further strengthen the fundamentals of the Nigerian economy, diversify from dependence on oil inflows, and minimize the debilitating pressures in the foreign exchange markets, the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Bankers Committee introduced the RT200 initiative designed to stimulate non-oil exports with a $200 billion US foreign exchange income within 3 to 5 years.
RT200 is essentially how do we begin to think about how to source foreign exchange for our customers' import needs without necessarily need to continue to resort to revenue from crude, which, like we all know, has come to zero or almost zero compared to almost about $3 billion monthly that we were getting in 2014.
While policies from the fiscal and monetary authorities were targeted at sustaining growth trajectory, and measures by the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria increased monetary policy rate to 16.5%. The country in 2022 still experienced an increase in inflation figures.
The long-term measure is to build infrastructure and come up with policy that will incentivize direct investments or foreign direct investment to this country. Not just foreign direct investment, even local investment, the real sector of the economy, such that, one, the cost of production here will be as comparable, if not cheaper, than what obtains elsewhere.
Several measures introduced by the government to cushion the effect of economic challenges on the overall outcome performance of the economy, however, attracted applause, as some Nigerians have thrown weight behind the economic decisions reached by the government to keep the nation's business environment friendly.
You look at the relative numbers, you can find that it appears we are not doing badly at all. And on the basis of this, we have seen the International Monetary Fund reduce global growth forecast from 6.1% to 3.6% for 2022 and 2023.
Financial analysts are enthusiastic that gains achieved in the previous year, most especially in the non-oil sector, will be surpassed in the new year with effective implementation of the 2023 budget estimate of 21.8 trillion naira, christened Budget of Fiscal Sustainability and Transition.
All right, that report from Lagos. Our next report is from Kaduna.
federal government has recorded giant strides towards ensuring infrastructural development in the country, cutting across various sectors in the year 2022. Northwest region has its own share of laudable projects geared towards economic development and employment generation to teaming unemployed youths. Work on the 375-kilometer Abuja-Kaduna-Zaria-Kano dual carriageway has also reached appreciable level of completion with the opening of some sections of the road for motorists.
Financing infrastructure, road infrastructure, by the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is yielding a lot of positive results, which is bringing succor to the people, to the motorists, is improving the flow of traffic, and certainly increasing our economic activities.
You need good road networks, convenient one that will promote safety, convenient means of movement of goods and people from one location to another. And don't forget, even when you have a factory or a farmer, when you produce, for people that want to move around, this cannot be done conveniently without standard and good road network.
Another road project within the year under review by the federal government is the Zaria-Funtua Road project. There was tremendous progress for the execution of 48-kilometer Kaduna Eastern Bypass Road project, recording more than 55% completion.
We'll give this the maximum attention it deserves amongst all the other roads that being built across the country.
Work is going steadily on the 614-kilometer Ajakuta-Kaduna-Kano gas pipeline project. The project is designed to ensure industrial revolution in the north that will create massive employment in the country. Artwork and other civil engineering activities have commenced at the Section A of Kaduna-Kano standard gauge rail project.
And then we are expecting the progress of the work to be accelerated more than the way it is now, because we have many equipment coming.
The expectation among Nigerians is that stakeholders should be patriotic to see to the completion of these projects and others by the federal government, as scheduled for more transformational development in line with the present administration's drive.
All right, DG Budget, of critics of the government to some extent admit that quite a lot is done in the area of infrastructure. So many of these projects going on, financed mainly through the budget, but there are Nigerians who say, yes, attention was given to infrastructure, but it could have been more. And the level of decay which the country's infrastructure had suffered demanded that more perhaps could have been done within that period. What do you say?
Well, without a doubt, we all wish that we could have done more. But, you know, the truth is, and that's the conversation that we don't have enough of, which is the fact that government is constrained by revenues available to it. And, you know, there's a lot of complaint about the level of debt. And for good reason, people ought to be concerned. But if you imagine that government didn't, resort to borrowing, even the level of investment in infrastructure that has been achieved to date would not have been possible. So it's a difficult choice. You would to basically grow your revenues before you can fund the infrastructure, or do you borrow? But you have to do so whatever way you choose. As in this case, government chose to borrow to advance infrastructure development, and then focus on trying to grow its revenue generation. And the government revenue generation is another area where we haven't got as much credit as we actually deserve. in terms of what has been achieved over the last 6 years in rejigging government revenue. To put context to it, in 2014, if you look at the 2014 budget, oil revenue was 57% of the budget for the federal government, federal revenue, and non-oil was 43%. Okay. The 2023 budget that was just signed to law today, oil is 22% and non-oil is 78%. And but for the real effort that has been put in trying to diversify government revenue away from oil over the last 6 years, with the challenge we currently face in the oil sector, if we were still as critically dependent on revenues as we were on oil, we would be in a far worse situation than today than we are. And in terms of infrastructure development, we would be even further behind. But the reality, and that's another fact that we've got to come to terms with, is that for Nigeria, as well as many developing countries, and especially those with high population or rapid population growth, the truth again is that government alone is not going to be able to provide the infrastructure to keep pace with the demand for infrastructure. So private capital needs to come into the infrastructure space. If private capital comes into the infrastructure space, people have got to be willing to pay for use of some of these of the infrastructure, and that's an area where we face challenges in Nigeria. The most people still don't accept the fact that they still believe providing infrastructure is government's responsibility, and they don't accept the fact that they have to pay.
How do you respond to that? Well, because for many citizens,
yes,
they tell you, look, we are already overtaxed anyway.
Yeah.
So if we're paying for government infrastructure, then it means it's tightening the noose.
In fact, it's part of the concerns that we have concerning this budget. But from what the DG said, it begs the question: how do we fund our development plans? How do we fund our development? Options available to every country is you borrow. We have tried borrowing before, and we saw where it took us to. We had to exit by sweat, but we are working ourselves back into the trap, into the debt trap, but probably for good reasons, because we are putting everything in the infrastructure mostly. But more importantly, you can also fund your development from domestic savings productivity, which is undermined by a number of challenges we've been identifying here. And then you can also go for foreign aid, which was what happened in the post-independent period. We were collecting foreign aid, and that undermined our development efforts. But there's the way out. And what is the way out? He mentioned it: private capital. How do you create the enabling environment to attract foreign and domestic capital? To do these same things government is struggling with dwindling revenue to do. Government is not supposed to have the kind of money to do all the development, all the infrastructure projects we have. What government needs to concentrate is to create the enabling environment so that the private sector will be encouraged to bring in their monies, invest in those critical sectors, knowing that government is the enabler, is the supporter, and is also providing level playing field. So if you don't, no amount of money you spend on infrastructure, yes, you can do infrastructure, but you can see you have to borrow to do the infrastructure, and then there you are not even able to conclude. So my take is that unfortunately this is the last budget, and there is no time left to implement anything. So the challenge to the incoming administration is to look at how best development can be funded. And I think there's no alternative to encouraging local and foreign investments,
which are also subject to so many issues here, so many challenges, peculiar challenges here.
Yes.
Creating this enabling environment. Okay, but what do you feel? You think taxation is a way out?
Honestly, I was so worried when the emphasis is on tax revenues, especially tax revenues. Yes, if the businesses are not doing well, who will you tax? How will you tax? You need to make sure that businesses are doing well. You need to create that enabling environment for them to do well, so that they can operate profitably and pay tax and provide services. Nigerians, I think, generally are willing to pay for good services. Nigerians are willing to pay for reliable services, and they can pay. But I think that emphasis on expanding revenue should not mean adding pressure on the taxpayer without commensurate creating the enabling environment. I think it can be counterproductive and dangerous.
See, can I just, because first of all, I need to push back on the insinuation that people are overtaxed in Nigeria, because the numbers don't show that. Nigeria currently has, well, the lowest tax to GDP ratio in the entire world. And yes, we talk about businesses. Nobody is going to tax a business that doesn't have profit. And nobody is going to tax anybody who doesn't have income. And globally, personal income tax is usually a very significant part of the way governments are funded. But just to put it in context, compare Nigeria with South Africa last year. In Nigeria, first of all, there are only about 40 million people in the tax net, and I'm talking about, the entire country. Okay, but these 40 million people in 2021 collectively paid less than 1 trillion naira in personal income taxes. In South Africa in 2021, they collected 14 trillion naira in personal income taxes. South African population is about a third of ours. We often pride ourselves with having more billionaires than others. So the reality is here that we have, extreme poverty existing side by side with extreme wealth. And we need to tax the wealthy much better. Indeed, we have what we call tax inequity in Nigeria, because the poor, including, lowly paid, servants and workers who are subjected to payee tax. You'll be shocked to see that some of them pay more taxes than some of the wealthy folks. This must be one of the few this world where you don't have an effective property tax regime. So people are, basically the wealthy are not paying their fair share of taxes in Nigeria, and that's why
ease of doing business. Now, this is a country where even to go and renew a passport is a challenge for you. This is a country where, businesses will come in, like airlines. They've come, have naira, they can take it out. Other investors that have come and put in their money, they can take it out. So these are the kind of things that ease of doing business. So the government needs to demonstrate it. That look, when you come in, invest in road network, that you will be able to take your money out. But what is on ground shows that this country, also with due respect to DG, is one of the countries that is the most difficult to do business. The cost of energy. I run a farm, I run a furniture factory, I run an engineering farm. I know how much it costs me on a daily basis, and which means every Nigerian feels the pinch of energy cost. These things add up. So if people don't pay taxes, in as much as it's not good not to pay taxes, but the government should also create enabling environment. The ease of doing business should not just be lip service. It should be taken, seriously. That look, any government official that tries to block any business person from accessing government facilities should be sanctioned, and this should be shown. People should see that the government is serious about this. But honestly, ease of doing business, still businessmen in this country and women, of course, are suffering. The government, in the incoming government, needs to look at what do we do, what can the government do to ease businesses, so that to allow, like the concession of roads in this country. I know the government is trying to do that. I hope they succeed. I hope they also go to other roads, and the foreigners that want to come and invest, they should be able to take their money out. Or even Nigerians who are running factories, who have industries, who have, spare parts to import, should be able to access foreign exchange without trouble. But now, as of today, foreign exchange is so scarce, manufacturers can't access foreign exchange. So these things add up. The government needs to look at it. Where we have two foreign exchange regimes in the country, this thing has to be stopped. Like subsidy, the government has to close its eyes and remove subsidy. Look, difference between truth and reality. Can we continue to, sustain subsidy? We cannot. So we have to tell ourselves the truth. That look, the government needs to remove subsidy. But then if you remove subsidy, what are the cushioning effects that you will give us to show that, look, okay, you remove subsidy, but then there are palliatives that will cushion the effect of subsidy removal.
All right. At this point in time, we'll take a short break. When we return, there'll be more on this conversation, and hopefully you can get to join in the conversation in the studio, and the lines will be on air. But stay with us. We'll be right back.
157-kilometer Lagos-Ibadan Railway is the first double-track standard gauge railway to be built in West Africa. The Mobolaji Johnson train station is a masterpiece, an infrastructure that is gradually becoming an iconic building in Lagos State. The modern facilities put the station on a world map of train stations. Likewise, other new train stations across the country built to world-class standards. The train and its convenience is indeed an admirable effort, with commendations from Nigerians.
This is a station that we have to commend the federal government for putting a beautiful face, empowering us in Lagos State, not only in economic and political arena. I can say that I'm really impressed with the infrastructures in place. Kudos to the Minister of Transportations. Kudos to the federal government.
Truly, good things are coming out of Nigeria, and the federal government is deserving of all the applause. NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. And we are at that segment now where you can join in the conversation in the studio. Shortly, the phone lines, the numbers will be on your screen and the lines will be open. You can call in and be part of this discussion. But we say this every Tuesday. If you're calling in tonight and your call gets through to the studio, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And we also encourage you to go straight to the point, make your comment or ask a question, and not to bother too much about the greetings. Just a mere hello would do. So the numbers will be on your screen, and you can call in. We'll start off with this report from Anambra State.
Somehow hectic and different. Like based on how things are very dry, things are not okay in the market, women are complaining, businessmen, they say every day by day they add money in the market.
Hopefully, as we step into the year 2023, we hope for a better world, a better Africa, and a better Nigeria.
The year 2022 presented to many Nigerians, especially the Southeast, a roller coaster. It was daunted with several challenges, though surmountable. Anambra State, Southeast Nigeria, was one of the states in the country devastated by the perennial flood, with very negative economic impact on the people, as farmlands, homes, and property worth millions of naira were lost to the disaster. Security challenges, among others, no doubt had its toll on businesses, with living standard of the citizens nosediving as a result.
Wasn't that good for any of these economic agents in the outgoing year. And again, the macroeconomic instability was a very major challenge to these economic agents, in the sense that inflation was really biting.
You need to look at realistic policies, that will enable starters to have opportunity.
Barring these challenges, the federal government had initiatives and programs aimed at cushioning the effect of global recession on the Nigerian households. Victims of the flood in Anambra State received palliatives, while the school feeding program alleviated some of the responsibilities borne by parents of millions of pupils who are beneficiaries. Partial opening of the second Niger Bridge in December 2022 and completion of the Enugu-bound Enugu-Onitsha Expressway are feats many have attested to will engender enduring social and economic growth in Anambra State.
I appreciate federal government, especially President Buhari is doing well. At least this one will ease the stress of the travelers for this fiesta period.
Yeah, so this second Niger Bridge, the opening of the second Niger Bridge is a welcome development.
The second Niger Bridge is going to help us, especially the congestion of this first Niger Bridge.
Analysts believe 2023 holds brighter prospect for Nigeria, more so as the country gears up to elect new leaders in the general elections.
All right, back to the studio now. And DigiBudget, if you were to take a cursory look at the 2022 budget and say, how would you assess its performance? And many people ask this question and say, if you look at what has gone, it gives you a better outlook on what is to come.
Well, essentially, the way we look at the budget, there are two sides to a budget. You've got the revenue side, you've got the expenditure side. And very often when people think budget, they just think about the spending side. When people talk about the performance of the budget, they hardly look at that side. But if the revenue side doesn't do well, then the expenditure side is not likely to do well. But I'm happy to report that the numbers for full year 31st December haven't come in yet, but as of the end of November, in terms of revenue performance, we are 87% of the pro rata revenue budget for up to, that's the highest we have, and basically it's oil that failed us, because the performance of oil revenue as of November was just 35% of the budget, because apart from the production shortfall, the budget was based on a 1.6 million barrels per day production. We averaged maybe about 1 and thereabouts for the year, but or slightly under. But that was compounded by the deficits. Honorable Farouk earlier on was talking about the challenges with accessing foreign exchange, and that's correct, and I do agree with him that we speak to business people. It's quite challenging for business people, and despite the fact that some progress has been made, because if you look at the enabling business ease of doing business rankings of the World Bank, Nigeria has improved somewhat, but there are still challenges, foreign exchange being one. The central bank governor recently that as of 2014, CBN was getting $3 billion monthly, about $3 billion monthly from NPC, in terms of contribution from the oil sector. Now they're getting zero. So you can imagine if we were still earning just the $3 billion monthly, what difference that would make to foreign exchange availability and the ease of. So these are some of the. That's why I keep taking us back to the conversation around revenues, because people always want to just keep it around expenditure. On the spending side, again, relatively, as Farouk again observed, on the recurrent side, debt service were on course. We're not behind. On recurrent personnel, salaries are not owed, overhead. But on capital, we're still under 50% of our.
We'll ask you to pause. It would seem that the calls are coming through already. Solomon from Port Harcourt is calling in. Hello, Solomon. Are you there?
Go ahead.
Hello, good evening. My question goes to the DG Budget Office, Mr. Ben Akubeja. We are looking at two-year budget, 2022, and the prospect of 2023. Now, what are the provisions made in 2023 budget that will help to cushion the effects of hardship on the citizens which they experienced in the 2022 budget? Number two question. Why is it that the country has continued, in my own opinion, to commit economic development sacrilege against a protective industry, which, if it has been developed to full capacity, there would have been a lot of fabrications and the setting up of industries, especially in the SME sectors, that will help the citizens to create commonwealth and even employ others. So why is the government of the day rolling out budget upon budget year by year without making sure that a steel industry comes up on full stream of production to help in the fabrication sector, making of the machinery to help us to develop the industries in Nigeria? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you went there, Jokuta. Right.
Well, so steel industry. First, you ask what provisions have been made to cushion effects of hardship on citizens. 6 years ago, the government introduced what is called the National Social Investment Program. Okay, in the 2023 budget, we have over 800 billion naira provided for that. These are for interventions, whether it's this feeding program or the conditional cash transfer programs or the Empower program, where youth, hundreds of thousands of youth are taken off the streets and given some temporary means of livelihood to earn incomes. These are some of the initiatives government is taking to cushion the fact that government continues to basically subsidize certain, for instance, power. In the power sector, while the tariffs for the higher bands for the larger electricity consumers have been raised, the tariffs for the lower bands have also have been pretty much frozen again, because those are that's the basic. So there's no doubt that people are linked, and then the investments in infrastructure, when government builds roads, that's basically for everybody. That's designed to create opportunities for everybody, whether it's a farmer to get their goods to the farm. So investment in infrastructure, where is investment in rail, whatever, to enable people move themselves or their goods, across the country. These are all the efforts to cushion. So I'm not sure when you say what vision made to cushion. These are basically the investment in healthcare. Government has made provision for a national social, national health insurance, where the government is seeking to make provision to cater for the vulnerable segments, where government itself is shouldering the burden of paying for their health insurance that gives them access to healthcare at public health institutions. But does this mean government is going to be able to reach everybody that is that needs a helping hand at the moment? No. We have a national social, a poverty register, but right now I think only about 2.5 million people in there are getting grants on a regular basis. There could be more people that deserve to be helped. But talking about still Ajaokuta, this of Ajaokuta is not as straightforward as otherwise you will have been cracked. This is a 40+ year running story for Nigeria. I personally believe that the solution to Ajaokuta is to get private capital into it. If after nearly 50 years government hasn't been able to make it work, I think government needs to acknowledge that it's probably isn't capable of doing the steel business.
Well, the president only a few days ago, when he visited Kogi, did say that the government had untangled all the legal impediments to moving forward. So perhaps that might well be one of the legacies that this administration will be living in. But again, we would have to wait for that and see how it plays out. But we have another caller, James, calling in from Bauchi, I believe. Yes, James, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, go right ahead.
Since the budget has been signed into law, when will it take effect? Is it immediately? Because I remember some previous years, it takes effect from July and August.
Okay. All right, that's it.
Now, I want to know when will the budget take effect?
Okay.
Is it going to take effect immediately?
Okay, who wants to know when it will take effect? The budget cycle that's now January to December. When it will take effect? Is that your question? But then, okay, well, we'll let the DG budget answer that. It would seem that's already in operation anyway.
The 2023 budget was signed today, so it's taking effect from today, being the very first business day in this year. But also, what happened was the National Assembly and the executive agreed to extend the implementation of the capital, just the capital component of the 2022 budget for a further 3 months up to March 31st this year. So the capital, some portions of the 2022 capital budget will be running in parallel with the 2023. But the 2023 budget implementation started today.
All right, thank you very much. Let's the question of forex. It's everywhere you turn. There are two main issues: foreign exchange, and Honorable Farouk talked about removing this subsidy on petroleum once and for all. But no government has been able to do it, and let's face it, even this administration is leaving it to the next to do that. if they can. But let's start off from the forex issue.
Yeah, yes, foreign exchange has been a big challenge, and it has undermined the rate at which investors even want to come to Nigeria. You imagine somebody borrowed money or sourced his money to come and invest, and then he makes profit. He can't take it back home. He cannot service even the loan he brought, where the money came from. That is not acceptable. When you go out, whether it's Mr. President or any government agency, to go and sell Nigeria's potential for FDI, you emphasize that yes, there is a law that supports repatriation of profit. The Foreign Exchange Miscellaneous Act is still there and it is still enforced. However, the challenges had been explained in terms of low production in crude and all the other issues. I think that issue can be addressed in various ways. We can go for export-oriented FDI, encourage and incentivize investors that want to produce what will be exportable. Then emphasize the non-oil exports under the Nigeria Export Promotion Council, incentivize that and stimulate it so that we can earn the currency. And then we should also encourage Nigerians to invest outside Nigeria if they have capacity, like Dangote is doing. And then they'll be able to earn foreign exchange and repatriate to Nigeria. Then we can also look at import substitution, because if we are spending all our foreign exchange by importing things, why don't we produce those things locally and save our foreign exchange from flying off? So these are some of the measures that can be introduced. But like you said, I think it is for the next government to really have a critical look at that and take care. And then in terms of the subsidies, honestly, it's long overdue. There's no reason to maintain subsidies. It's not even maintaining. I think it's part of the reason why we are not able to manage the economy properly.
Okay.
Yes.
We have another caller, another James on the line. This James is calling in from Abuja. Hello, James. James from Abuja, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Good evening, citizens. Okay. Yeah, I was trying to listen to the House of Rep member, former House of Rep member, and I saw some of his analysis concerning doing the business in Nigeria here. I had an experience of a tuition fee from a school, and we had a PTA meeting, and the owner was busy telling us that he spent 4 million naira on diesel every term. You can imagine. So there was need for school fees increment and the rest. You can imagine a school spending about 5 million naira for diesel for a whole term. Shows the terrible situation of our nation in terms of power supply. If you want to even have a normal barber shop, you realize that what the barber shop spends in a day for fuel is something not to write home about. Now, when you look at all this, you realize that doing business in Nigeria, something else. So we just have to do one of the major key things I think we have to look into is about the power supply. There's no way we can be doing business when the major components of running this business is at that kind of sorry state. The power supply is very vital. And also listen to the budget director, he was making comparison about South Africa and that of Nigeria. How much is the minimum wage of South Africa and how much is that of Nigeria? And he made mention of 14 trillion and that of Nigeria 1 trillion that we can generate. We shouldn't be making comparison with countries that the gap is very huge. We should be making comparison with things that we think are, in enhance with what we are doing. So that kind of comparison is not even something to write home about. So we should just go sit at the table and discuss about power supply. And at the rate actually they are even charging citizens tax, it's as if they are even hit the whole economy is hitting on the poor people. Charges and the rest. You see bank having issues with these other guys on card, 6 naira per charge for certain transactions you want to make. Everything is just hitting upon the poor citizens of Nigeria. So we just have to sit down. Even the minimum wage is an issue of debate that they are not ready to even pay. How many states are ready to pay? And imagine how things are skyrocketing. And yet they're talking about something else. So just have to sit down and do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Well, again, you raised the issue of cost of energy, power to drive the industry, which you need, and of course, allusions to the question of minimum wage. It's not very happy with your comparison earlier about the amount of tax remitted in South Africa and the figures for Nigeria. And his argument is that it's basically a matter of what's the income of those who are paying those taxes.
Well, first of all, there's a reason why globally, the denominator for comparing tax compliance across countries is by relating your taxes to your GDP. So if we pride ourselves with being Africa's largest economy with a GDP higher than South Africa's, then the principle simply means we have a higher tax base. Secondly, I was talking about personal income tax, and I was very clear about those who need to be taxed in Nigeria. And I made the comparison between number of billionaires in Nigeria and those in South Africa. I was not talking about taxing minimum wage earners. First, minimum wage earners are not taxed in Nigeria. All those minimum wage are exempted from tax. So, and then he's talking about bank charges for, alerts and whatever. Those are not taxes. So we need to, really know what are taxes. If you have no money in the bank and you don't transact, nobody is going to charge you for. Those are cost recovery from the bank for the service that, and oftentimes you can opt out that you don't want to receive alerts, and you won't be charged. So these are not. That's not. I think he's conflating the issues. But they talked about the school that is spending 5 million. Power, electricity is an old established industry. Power, there's no rocket science about power. The power sector was privatized in Nigeria, generation and distribution. Part of where we ran into a problem. At the point of privatization, there was a multi-year tariff order that promised the people who were investing that tariffs will be increased for them to recover their costs. When it came to time to increase the tariffs, people were not ready to pay.
Yeah, but they didn't have enough investment in the infrastructure in the first place.
No. First of all, nobody
of them did not have the technical know-how.
No. That's another thing. But the point is, nobody is billing you for power you didn't consume. So that's So if is the tariff was not till today we haven't achieved cost reflective tariff. So government is still, government is still subsidizing, power. In 2020, the cost of the federal government subsidized power electricity consumption of Nigerians to the tune of 520 billion naira. So and for 2021, that number was 300 and something billion naira. It's coming down. So, but right now, this school, and I say this with every sense of responsibility because we are all affected. We may be dealing with what a proverbial chicken and egg situation. If you take what it is costing all of us individually to generate our own power, whether it is by better pass my neighbor generator or with the bigger generators, it is much more than what it will cost us to have proper clean power generated and delivered to homes. If we were prepared to pay a tariff comparable to what they pay even in the countries bordering us, in this region where the people are not necessarily richer than us, then you would see more private investment in power.
Let's take in the school and we'll return to the matter of power. Umar Anache from Kebbi, thanks for staying on the line. I'm sure you're still there. Go ahead.
I'm still there. Thank you, Mr. Cyril. Good evening to all of you and happy New Year. You see, when it comes to construction of roads, this government did a remarkable job. But when it comes to the issue of economy, that is where the problem is. You did a similar discussion last 2 weeks, and one person from Funtua or Katsina made mention that anybody who criticized this administration on Uncle Barua program is an enemy of this administration. I criticize Uncle Barua program. I said it is not well implemented, but I put it to him, I'm not an enemy of this administration. Just like what Farouk says, what Honorable Farouk says, anybody who block the chances of the masses to get access to this finance and other facility, that person should be sanctioned. That is the only way to go. I seriously admit, Farouk knows what I'm saying. May God continue to bless our country. Simply because that man filled his pocket with Uncle Borrower's money. That is why he is saying that. May God continue to bless our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Omar Anachi. Well, let's stay with Honorable Farouk on this matter of the cost of energy and the matter. Well, he spoke earlier on of how difficult it is to access foreign exchange, but the matter of the cost of energy, which the last but one caller alluded to.
Okay, let me first of all, we had break in transmission here. I did not hear, probably 20 minutes we had a break. But back to what you're saying. You see, the cost of energy cannot be overemphasized. And I agree with the DG. You know that if all of us can probably contribute, what we spend individually can probably be cheaper than what we would have been spending. But then, you know, the government needs to look at the transmission in this country. You find out that they generate, but they cannot transmit because the lines are still short. We still have lines, the 330 lines that are 50 years old. They've not been changed. So the government needs to critically look at enhancing the transmission line in the country. Also, the government needs to look at this privatization of discourse. The government probably needs to take it over because certainly they have failed. Why should government, the DG said government paid 540 billion in subsidy. But if you ask Nigerians, we have not seen that subsidy. Yes, in the books of government, it's spent, but we have not seen the power. And I told you, I mean, you find out in you, DG, how much have you spent last month in your house? All of us, you know, it's all the same. So the government needs to seriously take back this discourse, honestly, because they have failed us as a country. Probably it was even a mistake, the way it was handed over. That is why probably the government said they were going to allow them to increase the tariff. But they were supposed to invest money into the discourse. None of them did. You know that. The discourse have refused to invest. They're still taking the monies from the clients and still not invest. So that's why you find out some of the discourse are taken over back by the government. So in fact, the whole discourse should be taken over, probably re-advertised, serious buyers to be brought in, and probably the government this time around take majority share. That's the only way. Without that, we will keep going in a round robin. You know, this power will elude us. From Obasanjo's time, when $12 billion was spent, up to this regime, this government promised to finish Mambila. It has not finished. It's not being started. You know, so we will continue in such a way that, you know, if no government is serious about this power issue, that's how the economy will not improve. No matter what you do, the economy will not improve. And the Ajakuta, my honest opinion is, government should give it out free of charge to anybody who will come and invest his money, and probably make sure he employs Nigerians, make sure that the place works. For 50 years, you will cry if you go to Ajakuta. What is the use of that edifice? And I know there are engineers who graduated as people engineers and they retired in Ajakuta without touching a spanner. How can a country grow like that? So if we as a people don't look at, have leaders who will have the courage to say, look, Ajakuta, look, the Russians, come and take it over. Take 100 years, but make sure it works. Because as it is now, it's just pride. We are priding ourselves that we cannot allow foreigners to come and take over some of these things. We need to do that. When we talk about the power, certainly we have failed as a nation. We have failed. So we need help. We need to call probably the World Bank and IMF to come and help us. If we go with this, aura of that, look, Nigeria is a free country, we can do it. We cannot do it. We can't simply do it. So I think the government should start looking at this, and honestly, the incoming government, or this government in particular, before it leaves, my advice is, before this government leaves, they should go after all those people that we see on the pages of newspaper. So amount of money is stolen. So amount of money is stolen. Probably if we can harness those monies, houses that were taken over, forfeited, sell them off. Let's get some money. Probably we'll be able to finance some of this deficit we're talking about in budget and so on. So this government, before it leaves, should ensure that some people are seriously prosecuted, their ill-gotten wealth are taken for everybody to see, so that the incoming government will make sure they start on a clean slate.
Now we have Yakubu calling in from Kaduna. Yakubu, hello.
Go ahead.
Yakubu from Kaduna.
Okay. Hello, good morning.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Good morning, Rad. I want to first and foremost disagree with Mr. Stover over the issue of removal of subsidy by this government. This government has totally removed subsidy. Right from September, when this issue of Kogi, flood issue happened in Kogi, and till this moment, government have not resolved this issue. People are still buying fuel all over, 300 naira, 320, 350. The least you have in Kaduna is 290. So what is the government doing about this? If you want to remove subsidy, what are you trying to do? What are you doing to cushion the effect of that hardship on people? People are still walking around. Check around and see how life is so expensive in this town and in Nigeria in particular. And I totally want to agree with the last person that spoke, the Honorable. He said that the government has failed, and the government has failed totally. And I want to agree with him, because the government has failed Nigerian youth, and I'm speaking their voice and their mind. Because Nigerians have suffered, the youth have suffered. The government has lodged them into poverty and a lot of things, or unemployment. So I want to appreciate you, and you people should do something and work out modalities that Nigerians will enjoy. Particularly, I want to direct this question to the DG budget. The Nigerian people are suffering, particularly the civil servant. I am not into the civil service, but you will notice that even the civil servant that earn, it takes them less than 1 week for that salary to get finished. So, what are you doing about it, sir? Thank you very much.
Right, I think the question borders on inflation, which virtually wipes off the incomes of the civil service. But perhaps one area where inflation has been most biting is in the price of food. And that has been pretty challenging. In 2022, in spite of all the efforts at addressing it, and I know you reeled out some of those, the challenges that I face, but it's still real, and a lot of families are apprehensive about what would happen this year.
Thank you.
inflation is often described as a tax on the poor, and that's what it effectively translates to. So inflation does hurt the poor, and sadly, that's really part of why people feel this way. And in particular, when you have high food inflation, food inflation is a key driver of our inflation. The food inflation is running at a rate even higher than the composite price index. Why is this? Some of it is related to the insecurity, where in the farming, the farmers staying in huddled in IDP camps, they can farm. There are people who have grown crops even to harvest it. So we have constrained supply arising from that. Then you also have the structural challenges of even then getting the produce from the farms to the markets in the cities, where that's why you see massive difference between farm gate prices and the prices of, and this food supply constraint is not just a Nigerian thing. You'll be shocked to find that Nigerian grains are going as far as Sudan and whatever, all of those. Nigeria is feeding quite a bit of the, and that's why I think recently government tried to implement a policy to limit access of foreigners to farm gates, to be able to further constraining domestic supply. The effort of government also to try and contain foreign exchange pressures by banning importation of foods, access to foreign exchange for importation of food, is also in the short term or short to medium term, driving up food prices. If we had bring in the import, but hopefully in the longer term, what that will do is force us to look inwards. For instance, we can all acknowledge that significant progress has been made in terms of rice, local rice production, and Nigerians have become now accustomed to, in fact, a preference for eating locally produced rice, whereas some years back, that wasn't the case. So, but while you're going through this sort of situations, there is it's tough. So in terms of petrol subsidy removal, Yakubu says petrol no, government hasn't removed petrol subsidy, and that's what is sad about the prevailing situation, because marketers are still accessing the product largely at the subsidized price, but at the pumps the citizens are not in. And if you were to actually remove subsidy, Yakubu, the price for a liter of petrol will not be 290 naira that you're paying in Kaduna. The price, you just have to look across the borders and you see what the price will be. The price will be over 500 naira per liter without subsidy. So what is happening now is that some men are, making a higher margin than they are allowed. And that's often what happens when you operate this sort of subsidy regime. People will go to great lengths to try and take advantage. That's the same reason why people are taking these products across, the borders. So in terms of what government, and that's part of why government took an 18-month extension of time from the beginning of last year for the subsidy, to allow it time to put in place, some initiatives and get, efforts to cushion the impact of. But truth of the matter is, any day that this is removed, there will be some immediate adverse impact. But trust me, in the long term, it will be better for Nigeria. And so I agree with both, Mr. Sakaba and Honorable Eruku both have advocated removal of the subsidy. If you remove subsidy, you will unlock investments. We often talk about diversification in Nigeria. When we talk about diversification, people are thinking about moving away from oil. But even within the oil sector, we have what we call concentric diversification. We've been exporting crude oil for 60 years. That's not on. We should be at the point now where basically, we're not exporting crude or next to something, and we're refining. If we were refining all of our crude domestically and only exporting refined products, we'll create jobs here, we'll make higher margin, we'll earn higher foreign exchange, we'll make higher profit. Even within that oil and gas sector, you have gas-based industries. Okay, you see the fertilizers and all of that. So there is still significant room for diversification even within the oil and gas sector.
We have another caller, probably our last caller tonight, from Eula, Lukman. Hello, Lukman. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I just want to comment on this global ranking of this of doing business and where Nigeria is placed. If you look at we should not be carried away by this global ranking. If you look at the ranking, you match it by reality on ground, you find that it's not fair. And it's because of one major reason. The security situation is not making it possible for investors to bring in their money. Because where there are uncertainty, nobody invests in it. But we get carried away by these global statistics and ranking at every forum without beginning to place it globally. This is the position. It doesn't work like that. Let's look inward. The real problem we have with our economy is the security situation. And two, there are no punitive measures for economic sabotage. You talk about oil theft. It is just in the pages of newspaper. Nobody is prosecuted. So many writers on it that it's an old thing. Now, you talk about monetary theft in large quantity. Nobody is prosecuted. All we just have is write up on the paper. I mean, let's face reality. This is the only country that we've gotten. And let's face the fact. Forget about this global ranking. How do we improve our revenue base? We must improve the security situation because there's a direct relationship between revenue generated and the security situation. In calm water, you can fish very well. In turbulent water, nobody goes to it, and that is the stark reality of the situation in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lukman. Okay. Well, yes.
I wanted to comment on what Honorable said about selling the discourse. I think we shouldn't just wish it away. I think it's very important because when you do such a major policy somersault, you are sending wrong signals to other would-be investors. But more importantly, you've not heard their side of the story. It's not only enough to say they are being subsidy. The subsidy, does it get to them? Secondly, all the promises, the agreement they signed with government at the point of privatization, has government fulfilled its own part of the bargain? And then when you are still using Mayo as the basis of pricing, it will not enable them to operate competitively.
Okay. I have had people say to me that there is nothing absolutely wrong with a policy somersault if it is for the best. And there are advanced countries in the world that had gone, taken on privatization and had reversed part of that based on the realities of the situation. So what's wrong with that if it happens it's for the better?
Yeah, if you do that, you have to abide with the promise. The enabling legal framework assures every investor that the government of the federation or state or local government will not take away any business run by a Nigerian or a foreigner. There is that constitutional guarantee. But the issue, what I'm talking about is that you need to understand the context. If we are running, government had unsuccessfully run these services, and we are saying that And DG has alluded to it, that if you have an investor who puts his money and he provides the services required and people pay for those services, things will go. Nobody. Why are we not complaining about the telecommunication sector, for example? Why are we not complaining about it? The energy sector has its own peculiarities, and I want to say that it is really a big challenge, and it has to do with the manner in which we sign whether it's privatization or BOT or what have you. You know, it's a long-term investment, and it requires everybody involved in the negotiation to live above board, because we are planning something for the next 20-30 years. And if you are looking at your short-term interest, you will never have it done properly. But I'm saying that if a mistake is done, we should avoid the mistake of throwing away the water with the child with the bath water. I'm saying that we can still look into these issues and review the decisions taken within the framework of what is the enabling situation. What is it that needs to be done to encourage a revival of that sector, rather than to say, okay, because things are not going. Remember this discourse, they borrowed money to even buy these assets. They borrowed money and they need to service that loan.
Questions were also raised about their competence. Some of the companies were known not to have the required
competence. You can acquire competence if you can from anywhere in the world.
Well, we
let me say, and I think that I agree with Mr. Sakaba on this. Has the privatization gone perfectly? No. But at the inception of this administration, it was faced with that dilemma. Do you really reverse the privatization, or do you try to work it out? I think if the government had taken that step at that point, it would have sent very bad signals, globally.
Yes.
Because Nigeria will simply get on the map of countries that reversed privatization. Yes. So what government had to be patient in dealing with this. First of all, what do? You try to work through your own commitments, as he said, under the terms of the sale, to put you at that moral high ground, to then be able to lean heavily. And so that's where government finally got itself to. That's why now, there's a heavier hand on the discourse about a number of them have now been, basically those owners have been sacked from the management, and the regulator has stepped in for hard action. But that's because government was now in a position where it acquired that moral high ground, and therefore you can demonstrate to investors, all whether domestically or internationally, that this wasn't just whatever.
Not all the disclosures were as clean as a whistle.
I mean, that's
Well, as we prepare to wind down this program, beginning with the UDG budget, what can Nigerians look forward to this year, 2023? But I've had people ask, is there a sweet peel, or is it going to be this bitter peel?
I'm an optimist. I'm a man of faith, so I like to believe that there's a sweet ahead of us. I like to see the glass, believe that the glass is half full. The IMF over the weekend came out with projections saying that 2023 will be a tougher year economically for the world. The IMF has revised its projections for global growth, down consistently over the last 6 quarters, down from a 3.6% to now 1.8%. The IMF MD says 1/3 of the countries in the world of the economies in the world will be in recession, will fall into recession in 2023. These are fairly, but in Nigeria, it may not. And so, and a major key to this is fixing the challenge of our oil and gas industry. It's still a significant part of this industry. The GDP wise, it's only about 7%, not significant. But in terms of foreign exchange, and in the medium term, we need the foreign exchange that it brings. In terms of its contribution to government, revenues, we need to fix that so we can basically get the benefit of the Petroleum Industry Act. Of course, we need to do other things, but I think that is one sector that if we crack and sustain the good things we're doing in the other sectors, of course, security will win. In the 2023 budget, as has been the case for the last 3-4 years, security is the highest. We're budgeting about 2.3 trillion naira for security and defense agencies in 2023. We must address security for Nigerians to feel better.
All right. Mr. Amos Sakaba, in just about a minute, what do you look at for 2023?
Well, I look forward to seeing the next administration having the boldness, the courage, and the political will to push through reforms and take decisions that will change the fortune of this country.
And Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, your last words as we wind down in just about a minute.
Yeah, first of all, let me respond to Mr. Yakubu. This government has far away from failed, certainly. And I never said that. So we're speaking as statesmen. We're no partisanship here. So this government has done very well, and that's it. But now also talking about the policy somersault, I'm putting it to my colleagues there at the studio that there is also what is called doctrine of necessity overriding public interest. Now, taking over this discourse is in the best interest of Nigeria and Nigerians. And I'm sure Nigeria can ill afford to continue to leave it with them because we have failed. This electricity is not there. So should we continue to fail? We should think in a better way. And this year, honestly, I think it will be the year of glory for Nigeria. All these projections by IMF, by the grace of God, is not going to affect Nigeria. The new incoming government will certainly build on what this government has done and even do better. I wish us well.
All right, thank you very much. And it is on that optimistic note we'll leave this conversation. As I always say, no one program can deal with all the issues. So I'd like to thank our guests. The Director General Budget Office, Mr. Ben Akabuze, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
All right. And an investment economist, Mr. Amos Sakaba, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. And of course, Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, businessman and former minority leader of the House of Representatives. It's always a pleasure to have you on this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's our program. We thank you for being with us. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Continue to stay safe.
Information is power. Everyone